Hi, this is Ed Day, your Rockland County Executive. I'd like to welcome you to the County Executive Forum. This is a monthly show that we put on, typically is aired on Monday evenings, and we ask you to check your local listings to find out when it exactly will be on. We bring various people to this show to show the citizens what we are doing for you in county government. Today, I'm very pleased to introduce my county attorney, Thomas Humbach. Tom came to us from the private sector. He came to us when I came into office in January 2014, and he is emblematic of the people that I brought into government. I make it my point not to hire people who are politically based. I look to bring people in who think outside the box, who know how to get the job done, and Tom is exactly that kind of person. So what we're going to give you today is, I know you would think the law department is not going to be something very exciting or very impactful, but the fact of the matter is the behind-the-scenes work that Tom has done is having a tremendous impact on his community. And there are a few things that have happened that have been publicly spoken about, and now you can get an idea of how this all came into fruition and how it is making our lives better here in Rockland County with the Day administration. So with that, Tom, welcome aboard.
Thank you very much, sir.
First thing we'd like to talk about, give us some of your background.
I worked in Goshen and Rockland courts for a long time, and in 2008 I opened up my own firm. Living here, I opened it up in Pearl River. For several years I did consumer-based law, things for people to help them out in disputes with larger organizations. And well, frankly, in 2013, you were looking for an election lawyer, and I worked for you.
Right.
But that's the background that brought me to where I am now.
Right. And you know, it's interesting, Tom, I asked Tom to help me out in my first election, and the interesting part about this is Tom was not welcomed to be engaged in my election. There were some people who put a lot of pressure on him not to do that. And Tom showed a lot of integrity at that time because he put some risk to his own career to help me in my election. I never forgot that, but it told me a lot about the man. And I had no second thoughts at all about bringing him on board because I saw the integrity and honesty he had. And I'm very, very proud to have him. And the people of Rockland County are really lucky to have you, Tom. So
thank you.
What I'd like to speak about first is one of the first initiatives that came out of our office, and something you were key in working on. As most do know, here in Rockland, and particularly some pockets of the county, there is a horrific slumlord problem. We have people who are living in squalor. These are apartments that are cut up. There are walls put up, and they're being charged cash rents, exorbitant amounts of rent. Most of the people who are involved, the residents there, are among the poorest among us. They have the least voice, and also our firefighters, our volunteer firefighters, who have to go to these places when there's a fire. Some may remember the incident in the Bronx where Jeff McCool was involved in a fire in the Bronx, and he and other firefighters had to jump out a window because they got blocked. Their access was blocked to normal egress because of a wall. So, we looked at that, and we always heard the typical, the county level of government can't do anything, it's a home rule state, and this is a zoning issue, building issue, and there's nothing we could be done. And all that was going on at that point was that we had landlords who were going to court, being fined a couple $100. Meanwhile, they're raking in 6, 8, 10 grand a month in cash rent. So clearly it was not going to stop it. So we were looking for a strategy to address that, and you came up with a very unique approach by using a different law, the sanitary code of the state of New York. Could you enlighten us a bit on how that played out?
Sure. I just remember first coming on and talking about your platform, how it dealt with economic development and fiscal conservancy in the county government, all of which had tools ready at hand. There was one piece, preserving Rockland, preserving the character of the county, that was kind of the stickiest one, because as you said, we don't have any direct tools to look into zoning or building codes and things like that. However, in looking around at all the laws that we had at hand, we found the sanitary code, which the State Department of Health allows us to have. And it's not just about disease or about things that may cause disease, it's also a safety code. And traditionally, it's also a fire safety code. And many of our sanitary code provisions relate directly to that safety, and we've kept that for a long time. Now, what we've done, it was reprioritize government. I looked at the code, I looked at the departments that were operating it, and I made suggestions to your office as well as to the Department of Health and Commissioner Rupert, who has been a great partner in this. And at the beginning, we were really just developing what's the framework that we can work with. That sanitary code allows our health inspectors to go to a location and see if the place is safe in accordance with our rules. And like I said, they're mostly to do with access for fire, safety, making sure that there's not loose wiring and things like that. There's also pieces about health, about mold and mildew, about places where, say, vermin can get in and things like that. But what it really gets to is, as you say, a protection for these tenants. And the landlords that are deferring this maintenance for so long that the place becomes, well, it's unsanitary, not compliant with our code, they're making a lot of money without paying a lot out. And people who do follow the rules, people who keep their places in accordance with the sanitary code, with fire codes, with building codes also, they are getting the raw end of the bargain because they are expending that money to make it good for their tenants and the people who live there. That's an unfairness. That economic disparity that is also a thing that this tries to stop. So what we want to try to stop is this: A, the direct cause of tenants living in a bad place, and B, the indirect benefit that bad landlords get from deferring the maintenance on their locations.
And we had more success than we expected. And main reasons why is understanding that what was driving this was greed, the profit motive. And with that, if you find someone a couple $100, they're not going to stop. But with the sanitary code, you can find up to $2,000 per day per violation. In point of fact, when we announced this a couple of years back, the first fine was $38,000. And the slumlord, now I'm going to call them a slumlord because that's what they are, came to our health department and said, well, can't we work this out? He said, you can work it out. If you don't fix everything, we can find you another $38,000 tomorrow. It got fixed. And the key here was we took the hearing form out of the courts locally and brought them to a county health department hearing officer, administrative judges basically. And they're hired by me, obviously. They're expected to fairly hear cases. And again, we don't get to them unless there's repeated attempts by our health department to get the slumlords to fix up their place. It's only when it's a last resort scenario do we end up in the hearing. And the fines are substantial. And that really has been the key. And the goal has always been to turn slumlords into landlords. And in most of the cases, we've been doing that. We've brought on more inspectors now, and we're getting the point across. And we're serving the people who need the most defense. Some of these folks are undocumented. They really are afraid to speak to anybody. And again, our heroic volunteer firefighters are risking their lives in these death traps. So it's working. Again, it's a very serious problem. So again, the effort is going to be long term. We are having an effect. We've collected well over $500,000 worth of fines already. And the other piece of this is that we are now utilizing the same notion and concept to have the rental registry, which is an adjunct to this effort, where for a $25 one-time fee, no more than that, just an administrative fee, we're registering apartments. And to what you said earlier, there are good landlords out there, and when you're registered with the health department and they're inspected, you get essentially a good housekeeping seal of approval, which is good for you to show people when you want to rent your place. So these are very positive things that are coming out, and we are having a defined impact upon this problem, which has really been a scourge upon many communities. So I want to thank you for your work in that area. Also, we had another initiative that we did, and this was geared towards overdevelopment. Again, New York State is a home rule state, as we know. Typically, all of the hearings for land use happen in the village or the town, the level of government closest to the people. And I think it's a great idea. I'm a former Civic Association president. I went to Clarkstown Planning Board, Zoning Board to redress issues that affected my community. And that's typically a good way to go. Unfortunately, and typically, really, one town has really been the one that has been problematic, and it's the town of Round Pond. The developers there are out of control. We see a change now in town government, and we're hopeful we'll see something happen because the abuse has been going on. the lack of oversight, the lack of proper planning precepts have just been beyond the pale. And the impact has been devastating on many communities in Ramapo and in Rockland County. So I issued an executive order, and this was guidance by you, obviously, and just talk a bit about the executive order and what it does.
Well, just to amplify something
Right.
that you said, over the past 5 or 7 years, the town of Ramapo and the village of Spring Valley have been criticized by the New York State Department of State
Right.
for their lack of enforcement efforts. And this has been in writing. It's not just some verbal opinion. It's something that they put in writing.
They almost asked us to take over the
village.
The village, yeah.
Yes. And so, again, I was searching through the codes, looking for things that could be done. And there is one place where we really touch on the zoning and the building code area, and that is in what we call the General Municipal Law Planning Review. And we have a Department of Planning that has the authority, in fact, the obligation under the law, to examine site plan applications, variances, things like that, that usually go to a zoning or a planning board before that board makes its final decision.
Right.
And these are places that are within 500 feet or so
yep.
of county roads, state roads, bodies of water, things like that, that affect the inter-county development. The application comes to our planning department, they review it, they have 30 days to review it, they send it back. They can approve it, say the plan looks good, or they can disapprove it in whole or in part and say, well, these things need to be addressed, whatever the concerns are. There's a matter before them right now, Bluefield Extension, where there are a massive number of variances being requested, and our planning department disapproved it. Now what will have to happen is it'll go back to Ramapo, and Ramapo is going to have to look at our recommendation, either adopt it, make the changes that we requested in order to make it a suitable plan, or they can override it. Now, in the past, these things have been overridden with such alacrity. They've just so easily overridden them. In fact, on Bluefield Extension at one point, they overrode a planning report that didn't exist because they just assumed it existed, raised their hand, and said, we override it, because they just overrode it automatically. Well, we have the new administration that's in there, and presumably a new one coming in January, and they're going to have the opportunity to make a change, and this will be the test. We have a substantial not a dispute, but a substantial disagreement with the zoning board about what should be allowed here, and we're going to see if they adopt it or not. The law also gives one other piece that we're really trying to enact, and that is when they do override, the county, and for transparency reasons, everybody is entitled to the reasons for the override. It can't be just an automatic, we raise our hands because we override because we want to do what we want to do. They have to give reasons.
And that's required by the GML.
That's required by the GML. But the courts have never put any teeth into it. If the local board never gave the reasons, the court said, that doesn't matter. You can just have you can still have your site plan permit, and then it would be incumbent upon somebody else to sue to get these reasons. Well, we're trying to shortcut that and spread the pain of it a little bit to get these reasons. So we have made it part of our county's permitting process. Things that are related to the land, well permits, road cuts, into county roads, stream permits, wetland permits, all these sort of things, things related to the health department, getting the addresses correct, some very fundamental things like getting an address for a new development. We've made it part of their job to look at these reasons that are supposed to come. And if they don't have them, then the developer or the property owner has to go get these from the town. And frankly, the towns have been giving them without any difficulty. So we think it's been a great success, and these reasons are out there now. Sometimes they're not the most verbose and lengthy reasons, but they are reasons, and now the community can see why it is that their boards are doing what they do, and that's a good step forward.
And we've had some success because essentially, as Tom mentioned, the GML does not provide for sanctions. It is a law, you're supposed to comport with it, but unfortunately there's no teeth, as you said. What we're doing in its simplest terms is we are taking the permitting process and saying, okay, you have a right to ignore the law. Obviously, you've been doing it. You have a right to ignore proper planning. You have your right, you think, to ignore the environment and injure the environment and the neighborhoods that you're intruding upon. And that's what's happening. Well, if you can do that, but I have a right as a county executive, by executive order, not to issue your permits. And one of those permits, which we had not talked about, was sewer connections. Not having a sewer connection obviously is going to be a problem. And the line that I mentioned at the press conference when we announced this was, if you want to build, go right ahead, but understand something, plan on having outhouses because you're not going to have a sewer connection. It got a lot of people's attention, and specifically the developers. And I'm very proud of one thing, because oftentimes you hear the narrative from some who look to divide this county, and they talk about this is a religious issue. I will point out that we had two Orthodox Jewish neighbors who were with me at that press conference, Mr. Peter Katz and Ms. Fina Greenbaum. Both these folks had expended much of their own money to sue their own town for one simple thing, to do the right thing for the neighborhood, because you had Orthodox developers intruding upon Orthodox neighborhoods. These folks who live in these neighborhoods are looking for the American dream. They have nice homes, they pay taxes, property and school taxes, they have a number of children go to private school. They are looking for the same thing everybody's looking for in their community, and it's being compromised by this unbridled development that's going on that is not consistent with any good planning precepts. The county cannot continue in that way, and this is why we felt this executive order was so important, and it's having an effect. We know we've gotten a number of developers a little annoyed with us, and that's okay, because we're doing the right thing. And to have these folks stand with me and thank you for the work that was being done there is a very positive thing to see. So we're going to continue, and all we're asking for at the end of the day, we're saying, Mr. and Mrs. Developer, we want you to comply with the law. The town, planning board, zoning boards, we want you to comply with the law. That's all we're asking, nothing more, nothing less. Just like everybody else in this county has to comply with is the law, and no more than that. So this will continue until we see a change, and when the towns and villages do the right thing, they do provide the proper oversight for development, everything's going to be wonderful again. But again, this is going to be a test. We know we have a new administration in Ramapo right now. I've met Yitzi Ullman a couple of times already, and I'm hopeful that what I'm reading about now, where they're going to change things, I'm hopeful it happens. But the Bluefield application is going to be it's going to be a benchmark. It really is, because here's a clear abuse that is right in front of us. There'll be an opportunity to see if what we're reading about and hearing is backed up by action. Talk is simple. Talk is cheap. Action's quite different. So we're going to see that very, very soon, and we're going to get an idea of what happened. Other things that's happening here in county government through our county attorney is efforts in conjunction with our district attorney. There have been a number of situations that you both jointly engaged in, using both the criminal and the civil statutes to clean up communities. There were a couple examples I know we spoke about on the way over here. Maybe you could share it with the audience.
I'm going to start with going back to something you said.
Okay.
When you were talking about just making sure the playing field is level.
Right.
You know, it's the justice of the matter. It doesn't matter who's doing what.
Exactly.
If they're getting an economic advantage, if they are saving time or saving money or getting something somebody else isn't getting, because they're breaking the rules, that's what's wrong. And it's been said around the office that they're the easiest guy to work with, because all you want is for people to follow the rules.
Exactly.
So I always know what to expect.
Thank you. And you know, it's interesting, when we first came into office, we had a motto, which we've stayed with, equal treatment for all, special preference for none. And this is a guide, and I do appreciate that, because what I want is just very simply compliance by all. And let's just get along and follow the law.
But that goes straight to the question they asked about these hotels and massage parlors that we've dealt with. We've now had 6 cases concerning places where there's been prostitution or drug dealing, or both, that we've used the county's public nuisance law to reform or close. We started with 4 massage parlors starting in 2014. These massage parlors, the people in them were engaging in acts of prostitution. These were places in neighborhoods, you know, right in downtown New City even.
Yes, I remember. And you know something, if I may just interrupt, we had 4 or 5 locations all within a few blocks right near St. Augustine's Church. There was a school there at the time. And I'm a former law enforcement commander, and believe me, I know how fast a community can go down when you start seeing prostitution and places like that in your community. It is a scourge on a community. It can hurt the community economically. And the subset of this are the women who are in there. These women do not go to school to become prostitutes. It's something that's happened to them. We have a sexual servitude piece to this. These women are being abused, and we've actually worked with the Centers for Safety and Change to try to intercede in their lives to get them back on a path that is not, so self-injurious. But
well, yeah, in our most recent case, the Days Inn up on Route 59. The Money Mike bust was there.
Right.
$1 million drug deals were happening there. The police were there. The Clarkstown police were there 5 to 7 times a week. Since the beginning of our filings in March and the news that went with that, the amount of law enforcement that had to go there has dropped to once every couple of months.
Right.
So it's a massive change. It's a massive reform of what's going on. And my understanding from talking to their attorney is that they've turned their business around and they now have a legitimate business.
Right. And fewer police calls means that's a savings to taxpayers, believe it or not, because those officers are now not going to the same place over and over again. Those officers have an opportunity to patrol the neighborhoods and make sure public safety is at its maximum, as opposed to them going over and over again to the same place for the same problem.
Right, and the resolution of that, they reformed their practices, which was precisely what we're going for, make bad businesses into good businesses, not to close them down per se, but to change them. But we did insist on a punishment. There's a provision in the law for a civil penalty, $1,000 a day. We negotiated, we found what they could afford, but instead of just putting it in the county coffers, the DA and I agreed that they could donate in the place of a penalty, $10,000 to Centers for Safety and Change, which is exactly the place that helps some of the women who are working here to change their lives.
Right.
So that's been a great success. We're now at the Nyack Motor Lodge. We have other places on our radar. So I certainly hope that it causes what we've done stops what's happening now. And if I get put out of business on this one, I don't care.
Yeah. Well, like I said, something, again, you made a very good point. We're not looking to shut places down. We're looking to make places comply with the law. And at the end of the day, people at home listening to this are realizing it's a common thread through almost everything we've spoken about: greed, the motivation of money. And these are very basic motivations I saw for years in law enforcement. It's something we're applying. If you understand what drives an issue, what drives a problem, only then can you start strategizing to solve the problem. And it's a simple equation, but it's often difficult to attain, which is what we walked into when we came into office in 2014. There was a traditional way of doing things, and it demanded outside the box thinking. This is where you have brought great value to the administration, because you have been doing that since you've walked in. These strategies that we're talking about now are things that you've been involved in, and of course you acknowledge people like Dr. Rupert, our health commissioner, and District Attorney Tom Zugerby, who's been very helpful obviously in these efforts. Our entire health department, we have inspectors there now who are former Bronx detectives, and they're very good at what they do. I can attest to that because I used to work with some of them. And they're working there, and they're doing the right thing. Our fire emergency services have mobilized the fire departments to help us identify some of these locations in service to them. These are volunteer firefighters, our everyday heroes who go out, put their lives on the line to protect us in case of fire. They do not deserve to be in a situation where their lives are compromised. So again, I applaud you for the work you've done in that area. One of the big stories we had here in Rockland County almost a couple of years back now, I guess. We had the pending sale of the Summit Park Nursing Home. Just to backtrack a bit, there was an LDC form to handle the sale some years back, 2013 as I recollect.
Yes.
And it was done for a reason. The reason being is you wanted a separate entity to vet any potential buyers. You did not want it left at the whim of government, the legislature and the executive branch. And I concur with that well before I was county executive. The LDC went about a business. It found a buyer for $40 million, as I recall. That buyer ended up backing out. They went to the second bidder, and that was Sympathicare, the $36 million. And we won't go into the entirety of what occurred, but the short version was that the buyer represented himself as having the funds. He asked for a delay in the closing. He got 9 more months that took him to September 30th, 2015. And on September 29th, 2015, the day before closing, at 9 o'clock at night, he sent an email terminating the agreement. Sadly, what that meant was the promise that we had of keeping our patients there, keeping our workers there, most of our workers there, was obliterated by that move. We did not have any funding to carry the hospital into the following year, and sadly we had to close the hospital. It was one of the tough decisions we had to make. The only slight halo that came out of that was the fact that we placed about 2/3 of those patients in local nursing homes, and because the nursing homes had more work, they hired about 2/3 of our employees back. So we were able to close in a manner that was as respectful as possible, but it was a tough, tough thing. But now we had monies that were down in deposit. We had litigation that was brought forth, and I'd like to maybe get an update on where we are with the litigation that was brought forth as a result of this pulling out of the deal by the buyer.
Yeah, I'll have to be a little bit circumspect,
Okay.
but there are many things I can comment on. The case was commenced early this year. We have undergone extensive discovery. There are millions of documents in this that my office is handling. We're working along with the attorney for the LDC, and we are going to now enter into a phase where we're really going to start resolving these issues. So it's coming up fast. We're going to be looking to get the down payment of $3.5 million, as well as perhaps damages for the delay based on the what we believe to be misrepresentations by the Sympaticare organization, that they in fact had the money, which we claim they didn't, as well as that they had the necessary licenses, which we believe they did not.
Right. And when do we see the next court appearance on that?
Well, a court appearance just happened where we ended the paper discovery portion, going over these million documents. We reduced them down to a couple 10,000 documents, and got the documents from the other side. We're going to be moving forward with depositions, and immediately following that, I think we're going to be making motions.
Okay, very good. And one thing I do want to bring up, we have done great work, but when I say we, I mean our managers, our employees have worked very hard to create efficiencies in county government, and this is how we've gotten much healthier financially, because our organization is running much more clear, and it's more efficient right now. So we're saving a lot of dollars. I'd like you to talk a bit about what you have in your office. I think we're getting, Ted, we had a couple minutes left, I believe. All right, so I think we have to close up. What I do want to say is Tom's budget has been reduced by how much since you've been in office?
50%. From 2013, before I got there, to the end of last year, it went from a $1.2 million expenditure of outside counsel to $600,000. And my internal costs have remained essentially flat during that whole time.
That's great. Well, anyway, listen, I want to thank you for being here, Tom, and I hope you found this interesting, our folks out in the audience in Rockland County. We work very hard to do the best we can for you. And I was glad today to give you a moment to look inside the under the hood and inside the engine to see what we do behind the scenes, and that actually have such a great impact a positive impact upon the people of Rockland County and our community. So with that, as I said, this is typically on Monday evenings around at 7 o'clock. Check your local listings. It's great to be here again and again. I'm Ed Day, your county executive. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.